everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. I would guess that most of us have had the experience at a Phish show where the band is communicating to us directly. Not communicating with the crowd. I mean, the members of the band are playing a show that speaks to our exact life experience. We've all been there. Whether or not you've ever made eye contact with Trey right before they leave the stage after the first set, I'm sure we've all said at some point, it's like they were playing right to me. There's no denying that the best kind of art is the kind that speaks to you, the kind that you can understand and appreciate through your own personal lens. Today's guest, Nate Schwerin, had a life-changing experience at the Phish show at Dick's on September 5th, 2015. As you'll hear Nate describe, it was right out of a cheesy movie, but it happened to him in real life. It's no surprise that Nate's game-changing show happened at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. Including 2023, Phish has played 38 shows at the venue. It's become a fan favorite. It's also no surprise that some fans have had some of their most meaningful experiences there. But that's enough from me. It's Nate's story to tell. Let's join Nate to chat about Big Sky, Montana, The Catcher in the Rye, and being 13 years old at your first show as we break down September 5th, 2015 at Dick's Sporting Goods Park in Commerce City, Colorado. Nate, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm doing great, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I'm so glad to have you here. We are both here because we love Dick's.
We all love Dick's.
We all love Dick's, and more specifically, we love 2015 Dick's. Today's show, September 5th, 2015 at Dick's, which was the second night of a 3-night run. Do I have that right?
Yeah, second night of the run. Exactly.
Cool. So we're going to go over a lot today. We'll hear about you as a fan. We'll talk about Dick's in general, but my favorite topic, not Dick's, but 2015, Phish in 2015, because that was a hell of a year. And then we'll break down the show. Sound good to you?
Yeah, it sounds like a great plan.
Great. All right. So, Nate, let's get to know you a little bit as a fan with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
So, Nate, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember from it?
My first show was 10/24/95. I was 13 years old, and it blew my mind from beginning to end. So my good friend Zach, his dad was kind of an old deadhead. You know, Jerry had just died that summer. So he wanted to check out Phish, and Zach and I were fans of Phish already. My older brother had kind of introduced us to the band, had listened to, some of the albums. So we got the tickets to go, and I knew some of the songs, but not a lot of the songs. So it was just amazing. Everything from wandering around the lot and seeing the huge school buses and VWs with all the Grateful Dead insignia. And like the one thing that really sticks out from like the lot from that show in particular is like, I guess the influx of the Deadheads, kind of onto Phish, the Phish scene, Phish tour. So it just seemed like a lot of like crusty old Deadheads. And like, it was cool to see, an older crowd than any, probably any show I've been to since. Going into the show, I remember the Sleeping Monkey stuck out to me. I remember Prince Caspian really blew my mind. I loved the books, the Chronicles of Narnia, and had no idea that Phish had a song called Prince Caspian. So that was really cool. 13-year-old kid, it's like one of my favorite books. Oh my gosh, they have a song called Prince Caspian. That was really cool. The audience chess match was pretty neat. I distinctly remember May's jam getting pretty crazy. The You Enjoy Myself vocal jam in particular, if you're not familiar, recommend checking it out. It's pretty intense, pretty scary. I was a little overwhelmed at the time. I was like, what in the heck is this?
Was that
really just the whole thing.
Was that in Spartansburg? Do I have that right?
No, I'm sorry. Madison, Dane County Coliseum, Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah. I think it probably flies under the radar for fall 95. It's a good show. It has some highlights. The Antelope is absolutely ripping. I've heard it referred to as someone's favorite Antelope. I'm not putting it that high, but really good Antelope, really good show overall. And as a 13-year-old kid, just the whole thing, the sights, the sounds, crazy like hippie lady like noodle dancing in the aisle. Like, what is going on here? This is cool. So I was all in.
It sounds like you just
show.
summed up all of Fall 95 in one anecdote. It seems like you got
Right.
everything there, right? Influx of deadheads. You got a crazy antelope, the chess match, everything was, every time I have a show, a guest on that talks about Fall 95, it just seems like there was something about that tour, and it wasn't just the length, even though I do think it is Phish's longest tour ever. There was something about that tour that was transformative, where we kind of entered as underdogs and left as the champions.
100%. Totally. Yep. It was kind of really changed the whole trajectory, really. They're just like stadium rock gods after that tour, like certified.
Right. Complete with quadrophenia.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And then, just another thing I just remembered, Acoustic Army at that show. So they can go from, stadium, like melting your face rock to this quiet, intimate 4 guys on bar stools playing acoustic guitars. Like, it was just the coolest thing I ever saw. I couldn't believe it.
I have to ask you, because I'm a middle school teacher, so I deal with 13-year-olds all day, every day. And my first show was in 15, I was 15. And so I'm curious, do you remember what kind of music you were into before you went to go see Phish? Because I can imagine that blowing the mind of a 13-year-old whose world generally, just because of the age we live in, is pretty small. So this must have been a whole new place, like a whole new set of surroundings, environment for you. What was your musical life like before Phish?
Like I said, my older brother had introduced me to Phish. So like I consider myself like a pretty good fan already at that time, maybe for a year or two before. I had Yunta, or I should say he had, and probably Lawn Boy, maybe Picture of Nectar, probably. So like I knew I had a few, was familiar with some of their songs. I really liked them. I liked the Grateful Dead. I was, aware of the kind of the Dead scene when Jerry died. I was obviously very young, but like really most of my music kind of came from my brother. Beastie Boys.
I'm sorry to ask, how much older is he than you?
He's 4 years older than me.
Okay.
So I think at this show, he was probably like a freshman in high school, if I remember correctly. So, he was a little bit older. But like my other favorite band at the time was They Might Be Giants. I was like, all those were kind of like the twin pillars of my like musical like listening at that point was They Might Be Giants and Phish. Past that, I don't know, probably, Beatles. Like I like to listen to the oldies on the radio, random stuff like that. But I think my musical tastes were kind of just starting to develop, I guess.
There's definitely a middle of that Venn diagram of Phish and They Might Be Giants. Like
100%,
Phish,
100%. Yep.
They get along quite well. In fact, I think they shared the same A&R person at Elektra Records.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. That's pretty interesting.
So behind the scenes and in front of the curtain, they're somewhat alike. But Nate, what was your most recent show? And what did you think of it?
Most recent show was the last night of the recent MSG run. Whatever the date was, I don't recall off the top of my head. Good time. Definitely enjoyed it. Had a lot of fun. We did the whole run. We had the same seats the whole run. We were in section 2, like pretty much right behind Chris Kuroda. Kind of on the risers, right? Straight back from the lights from the stage. Amazing sound, amazing visuals. We were right on the aisle, so plenty of dancing room. The crowd was great. Really no complaints at all. The music was good. Obviously the long tweezer. The Guy Forget was a huge highlight. As a self-admitted stats nerd, I was happy to check Guy Forget off my list after I felt ripped off by not getting it officially listed on, I think it was 12, 28, 19, I think it was one of the New Year's runs where they teased it and it sounded like, a full-on Guy Forget, but like on Phish.net, it wasn't listed. So I got finally got my Guy Forget for my stats. So that was exciting. So yeah, it's a good show. Nothing, not necessarily mind blowing. The whole run, it was fun. Didn't totally blow me away, but it's good quality Phish. Can't complain. Had a really good time.
I agree. And as a fellow stat nerd, self-admitted stat nerd, that was a big smile. Like, to me, that's the sort of thing that makes it worth it just for that. I love Jam Night, obviously,
Yeah.
from the Baker's Dozen. And even with all the hoopla surrounding Lawn Boy, which obviously deserves its praise, the one thing I remember is, they played End of Session.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. Yes, I feel like I was the only person in my section who recognized when they went into End of Session. I was like, hands raised, like yelling, like, oh my gosh. And everyone around me was like looking at me like, what is this guy doing? Like, huge highlight of the whole Baker's Dozen for me. I'm with you. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a big 1.0 stat nerd. Like, if you know, you know moment.
Yep.
Let me ask you, when you go to a show with friends and you're in a group, what role do you tend to play? Are you the chaos agent where no one can control you? Are you the troublemaker? Are you the dad of the group that needs to take care of everybody? Are you the guy who wanders off in the middle of the first set and doesn't come back till the encore?
Funny that you should mention that. We'll come to that last little tidbit later, but I think generally with most shows, I would say my role is maybe coordinator. We've got Phish fans from literally all over, friends from all over the country. So I feel like I'm usually the one to kind of plan the meetups. Usually it tends to be like the MSG shows where we all, where we see everybody. So, all right, we're meeting at Stout at 6:00, be there or be square, meeting up with everybody or texting at set break, let's go grab a beer. So I feel like that's kind of my job during the show. I'm kind of pretty much just, in the zone, dancing, not really talking to anybody. But I think post show, maybe set break, and like after show, it's like, and if I don't do it or my wife doesn't do it, nobody does it. It just it doesn't happen. So it's like, well, haven't seen you in a year, so let's get together and have a beer and talk about that sweet show that just went down.
Aside from Phish, which band do you think you've seen live the most?
So this is where I have to cop to having gone on String Cheese Incident tour in fall of 2002, which I feel like is an acceptable time to go on String Cheese Incident tour. I had a great time on those shows. I don't know, it was probably maybe did the whole fall tour, like 12, 15 shows just lined up for me. I was living in Colorado at the time. The tour started in Bozeman, Montana, which is where my older brother lived. So I went up and visited him and then did a whole tour with my roommate. Good times. Haven't seen them or really listened to them since. I would probably, and then after that, local Grateful Dead band, Cosmic Jerry Band. Anyone in New Jersey, shout out to Cosmic Jerry Band. See them if they're in your neighborhood. They're super good. We see them all the time. So that's probably nobody else really even comes close to.
Right.
I mean, I've seen Phish. I think I'm close to 57 maybe. So nothing's even remotely on that level. But
in reference to your String Cheese tour, are you now or have you ever been a hooper?
Never once, never. I don't think I have the hips for it. I had a friend in Montana that was a huge Cheese fan, this guy Jason, and he was like all in on like the hoops and just the whole scene. It was just hilarious. He would try to get all of us into it, but I don't think, definitely never hooped at a show, but I was very prevalent back then. I don't think I've seen them since 2002. So I don't know if that's still a thing at shows. I assume it is, but I don't know.
It's funny you bring them up. I saw them just about 3 weeks ago. They're on Willie Nelson's recently concluded Outlaw tour. They're like mid-level. They're not right. Bob Weir is actually right before him. And then they're before Bob Weir in the lineup that I saw. I saw them at a stadium in Forest Hills in Queens, and no one was hooping at all. And to be honest, because I used to see them a lot in the mid and early 2000s as well.
Yeah,
you probably haven't missed much, and that's no shade to String Cheese. They just sounded as one would expect, a little less than they used to have. But I think that's just generally true across the scene.
Yep, funny. I'll have to see them again one of these years if they ever come by again.
Yeah, don't miss out. It is still a good time.
Yeah, I always had a good time. I never had a bad time at one of their shows. I mean, I really enjoyed it. So I'll have to check them out again.
Well, getting back to Phish and the show that we're going to discuss today, next question on the lightning round. Do you consider Dix to be part of Summer Tour?
I would say no. I mean, it's kind of the exclamation point on the end of summer, but I would say not officially. I guess I would have to look at like different years tour calendars. I think there's some years where there's not much of a gap between the end of tour proper and the Dix shows. But I think most years there's even like a week or two off, and it feels different. I mean, I only went to Dix the one year, but even as like an observer or someone who's following the tour, to me, it feels like not really part of summer. I guess it's kind of officially fall. Kids are back to school, and maybe that's changed now that I've moved to the East Coast, and all the bennies go home, and it's local summer now, so it's kind of like a different thing now. I don't know.
I think I agree with that. It is its own thing. It's like the Dix run, and you
Yep.
say that with no regard to whatever happened over the summer. So
Yep.
I agree with you there. Finally, Nate, what is the weirdest thing that you've ever seen at a Phish show?
So the thing that comes to mind, the Gorge in 2013, I think it was the first night, if I remember correctly, 7/26/13. Walking in from the campground, before the show, long winding kind of path up to the entry, and kind of just before you get in, there's big area where everyone you have to throw out your garbage before you go in, your bottles, your whatever, food wrappers. You can't bring anything in, beer cans, you name it. So there's just like one garbage can is completely overflowing. There's just like a mountain of like garbage like spilling out all over the place, and there's this just classic like dready wook like sitting in the garbage, like cross-legged, like spreading like garbage like up to his waist, like moving his arms around and like looking at everybody. Anybody want some garbage? Give me your garbage. You need some garbage? I'll trade you garbage. Just like sprawling, rolling, playing in the garbage. So that might take the cake.
When was this show played?
Looking at today's show, September 5th, 2015 at Dix. This was, I'm going to kind of frame it in the lens of Summer Tour that year, because to me, it's kind of impossible to separate them despite the conversation that we just had and that we agreed. So the summer of 2015 was, in my opinion, the best tour that the band has played in the 3.0 era. Trey was well rehearsed for Fare Thee Well at the beginning of the summer and around July 4th. And there was a batch of new songs like Blaze On, No Men in No Man's Land, Mercury, Shade. It gave the band like new springboards to improvise. And on top of it, I think this is something that kind of folds into the Fare Thee Well, but maybe became really, it flowered during the tour, that Trey had complete control of his tone and his gear. He would often use the Mutron pedal that he used during Fare Thee Well to kind of not quite copy, but kind of give the essence of Jerry Garcia's guitar. And he continued to use it throughout the summer with Phish. Like, I remember at the time, this was the sort of tour where fans at every show had an argument to make that their show was the best of Summer Tour. Where were you in the summer of 2015 that led to Dix?
So in summer of 15, I was like 2 years back into my Phish fandom, back on the train, so to speak. So after my first show in 95, I saw them up until 2000. And then for a variety of reasons, kind of, lost interest, moved out to Montana where they weren't playing, listened to other music, yada, yada. Like for whatever reason, number of reasons, I didn't see Phish for 13 years. And then went to the Gorge shows. Those were my first shows back in 13. And then from that point on, I was all in. I was like, oh, yeah, wait a minute. I actually love this band that I haven't seen in forever and almost haven't even thought about in forever. And, it's kind of from that point really till now, I've just been, completely all in again. So I was living in Montana and, following, along pretty heavily, pretty religiously with, couch touring, streaming the shows, listening to them. Obviously, there was a lot of hype that year. They, sounded great. They hadn't sounded that good, really since they came back. I would agree with you there. Trey just sounded amazing, which he really didn't for a lot of early 3.0. Just didn't have that nimbleness, that dexterity, just fluid, effortless kind of runs on the guitar. I feel like that's what like the Phish fans eat up, and like it was like back in a serious way. We drove down from Montana. We didn't go to the first night of the run, but we did the second and third night of the run. So we came down, stayed in Denver, and yeah, just had really good times.
And it should be noted that the third night, the night after the show we're about to discuss, was the one with the thank you encore, the famous thank you encore, where I remember following along at home that midway through this show, today's show, the Saturday night one, a lot of people were, as Phish fans do, starting to grumble, oh, they're not going to do anything special. None of the set lists have spelled anything yet. It's such a thing. I was thinking about it today while I was preparing for this conversation. When you treat someone so well as Phish has done to us as a fan base at Dick's, it takes no time at all to become entitled. And 100%. So, yeah, and as fans, we are probably amongst the most entitled of any fan base. But 100%. This show that you chose to speak about today, I came away with it listening that it's not necessarily the most mind-blowing, amazing jams. Go back to it. They played Guy Forget at this show. You got to listen to it. But it's a classic, amazing Saturday night special Phish show. What is your overall view of it? Or would you agree or disagree with me on that?
Yeah, I would totally agree. Strictly from a musical standpoint, from a going back and listening to it standpoint, I think realistically it probably falls on the lower end rating wise of, the tour, the summer tour of the year. There's not really, other than the chalk dust, there aren't crazy highlights. There is just, like you said, very solid, well played, ripping, fun show. It's great to attend, and, special to me for personal reasons. And I like 15 being such a good year. I think, a lower end year for 15, probably this show was played in like 11 or 12, it probably, would have been rated a lot higher. It's obviously all relative with Phish and everything's contextual, but great show, fun to listen to, fun to revisit, but not a ton of like musical stuff that sticks out with you necessarily, realistically.
Earlier you mentioned roughly that you've been to around 56, 57 Phish shows. Of all the jams that you've seen and all the shows that you've seen, why do you have attendance bias toward this specific one?
So this show is super special to me because I met my wife at this show. My, future at this point, but now current wife. So before the show, wandering around a lot, I mentioned I drove down from Montana with my friends, but another good friend of mine, Brett, flew out from Boston to meet us, and he stayed with us. He's no longer with us. RIP to Brett. Shout out to Brett. But walking around the lot before the show, we have some mutual friends, and he noticed, he recognized, I didn't know her at the time, but my wife, Janine, she's like, hey, Nate, this is Janine, Nate, you guys got to meet. And had one of those moments, it's like a movie where, I kind of put my sunglasses down and look at her, and there's like a beam that comes down from heaven, and it's like everything stops, time stops and stands still. And it's like, just have this moment, where we lock eyes. And that first time we literally only talked for like a minute or two, but one thing led to another, eventually shortly after the show, we got into like a group text message, and then the two of us started texting on the side, started talking every day. And then in February, the following February, she's in New Jersey. She was living in New Jersey. I was living in Montana. So we were just talking, kind of doing the long distance thing. We met up in Colorado for the Ween comeback shows in February. It was like Valentine's Day weekend. And at that point, it was just like, there's obviously something here. She's living in New Jersey. She's had kids and owned a business. There's no way that she can move. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm just bartending, ski bumming in Montana. I've got nothing tying me here whatsoever. And I've kind of been wanting to, thinking about moving for a while anyways. So why don't, how about I move out to New Jersey and see what happens? A little bit later, we get married, and here we are. What is it, 8 years later now? Going strong. So that's why this show is kind of like a delineating mark really in my life. It's kind of before this show and after this show. Everything this show kind of set in motion, everything that completely upended me and totally changed the trajectory of my life.
Set 1.
Well, the show starts with No Man in No Man's Land, and it's a short version, considering what the song has become. It was still new, though, at this point. To me, this was the song of the summer. They played it, I believe, at the first show of the summer in Oregon. And I don't think they went more than maybe 3 shows at a time without playing it, or maybe even every other show, it seemed. It's just a vamp, right? It's one chord, one drum beat, and everyone's dancing for like 8 minutes straight. This version sticks very closely to Type 1 territory, but it's really energetic, and you can tell the crowd's into it. It's Saturday night. We're at Dick's. It's the end of the summer. How exciting.
Yep, exactly. Just, dance party, classic 15 sound, Trey kind of doing his best Jerry impression, just, ripping short version, but funky dance party to get the whole place is just jumping right off the bat. So perfect opener.
Were you on the floor or were you in the stands for this show?
We were in the stands. Yeah. Like kind of Mike's side, but, pretty high up in the stands.
After No Man in No Man's Land, it's Martian Monster. And to me, I know that it's not quite been a year at this point since Martian Monster debuted, but almost. I love how this song, and a lot of the chilling, thrilling songs, with this one more than the rest, just fell immediately and comfortably into the set list. But that initial roar when Page starts any of the voices, the synthesizers from that album, and the crowd automatically cheers. I think that this one, Martian Monster, gets a bigger reception than almost any other one.
Yeah, I think so. Especially this version, the audience just goes nuts. Yeah, they're just eating it up, and it's another good funky dance song. So they're setting the mood early.
Yeah, Mike's bass is very forward on this. On the recording that I listened to, at least, he is leading the way. And I was wondering if you noticed this a little bit later in the show, around 2 minutes or so, or on the track. There's these sound effects. Is it potato chips crunching? Do you know the part I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. Like, I always think of that as like the Cookie Monster sound effect, like alien Cookie Monster or something. I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know what it is, but I know. Yeah, And
I like Alien Cookie Monster a lot better. I'm going to stick with that from now on. So there's a great organ solo in Martian Monster before they then hit the trio of NICU. And my first thought was, this is a nice opening trio of Type 1 songs. My kind of set, like good song choices, 2 new ones, and then a classic to bring us back.
Yeah, definitely. I always feel like NICU is good, summer vibes, good, they're definitely hitting a mood so far at this point in the shows. I listened to this show a couple times through, and the first time I really focused on the music. Second time, really listened to the lyrics. And all throughout the show, there's like lyrical cues that are specific to my story, specific to like how I was feeling at the time. And I kind of had a feeling of one of the Phish or one of the Dick shows where they spelled most shows spell everything. I don't recall what year it was off the top of my head, but just that kind of idea that every show you kind of bring what you have to the table and you kind of interpret it. Every show kind of speaks to you. The lyrics, the music, where you are at that point in your life. Like really listening to the show and really paying attention to the lyrics. A lot of the stuff just jumped out at me. In NICU, it's just the sand dollar day at the shore. 7 months later, I'm moving to the Jersey Shore. So that kind of stuck out at me. I thought that was pretty cool. And it's just such like a beachy, like, I don't know. I love NICU. I'll always take that. So
me too. Cool. I've said it on this podcast a lot. It's the first Phish song I heard live at like my first show. It was the set one opener. So I always go back to it. I love it anytime, anywhere they play NICU. And usually when I'm listening to a show, whether it's for this podcast or if I'm at one live, I'm always wondering, is this going to jam? When's the jam going to come? In addition to being a stat nerd, I'm big on the jams. And this show, as I listened to it, because next was Stealing Time from the Faulty Plan, it stayed within the confines of the song, but there was just a really strong piano solo and a guitar solo. And I just pictured this as kind of a brick wall, this whole set so far. It's just good, well-played songs, and there's choices. Like, you wouldn't be sitting down. I know most people don't sit down at all during a show, but there's no need for a breath yet in the first set. And usually the third, fourth, or fifth song is when you get that breath.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was just go, go, go. And ironically, on that note, I was go, go, go at this point. So somehow I wandered off for my friends and literally actually spent the rest of the show by myself, which first and presumably only, I don't see it happening again, but only show I've ever spent other than the first few songs by myself. So it kind of wandered off and, just ambled around by myself for the rest of the show.
What grabbed you, if you remember? Was it just, I'm just going to go take a walk? Was it as simple as that? Or was it, you didn't like where you were at the time, or you saw something over there?
I couldn't really speak to that for sure. The spirit moved me. I don't know. I was with my friends. We're all just dancing. I'm just kind of feeling the music, feeling like I just, met this cute girl before the show, and just some like weird energy, something just, transpired in my head. I just, wandered off and just kind of danced my way up, probably to the beer line and then around the concourse, and just kind of went with it.
Yeah, we've all been there. I certainly have. After Stealing Time from the Faulty Plan is bouncing around the room. And the first time I listened to this show, I do most of my listening and my note-taking in the morning when I have coffee on a weekend. And I was wondering, what was the vibe like in real time? Because I was really enjoying it, but it's not like filled with rarities. They like you might expect at Dick's. It's not killer jams yet. It's a good jukebox set, I think I would call it, which there is a place for, especially in the 3-night run. Do you remember what the vibe was like in the audience? Were people excited after every song, or was it kind of a little bummed out that they weren't playing any tricks with the audience?
No, the crowd was like totally like hanging on every note, like really locked in, really high energy, just like total party vibe. Saturday night, Dick's, like everyone was totally into it. I feel like they could have played like The Line and Let Me Lie and Petrichor, and everyone would have just been like, this show is amazing. Yeah, really, really good, strong, upbeat vibe for sure.
I like that you just name a bunch of Big Boat songs in a row to say what would bring down the mood.
And I don't even mind Big Boat, but hey.
Well, coming up is 5:55, which is on Wingsuit or Fuego, I suppose. I always called Wingsuit, which I've never been too hot on 5:55. It's not bad. I have nothing against it. I just kind of interchange it with the Moment Dance every once in a while. I don't think they should be allowed to play both songs in the same set, which they do. But
Right.
5:55 was good. And then Winter Queen, which is kind of the opposite. I love Winter Queen. And a lot of people rag on it. Where do you fall on this song?
I'm with you. I like it. I don't mind it at all. I think really looking at the show so far, it's kind of the first cool down, I guess you could say, but it's a nice cool down. It's not super mellow. I think it's, beautiful playing from Trey, kind of a not ambient, but, kind of quiet psychedelic song, almost in like the realm of like a mellower reggae, something like that. Maybe I like it. I don't mind Winter Queen at all. I feel like it's a pretty nice tune.
Yeah, I agree. And when I was typing out my notes when I was listening, which is for anyone listening who hasn't been on the show, I kind of do it in a like James Joyce sort of stream of consciousness way. I just type as I listen. And I almost wouldn't write this, but I did. At around 3.5 minutes, I wrote, "Dare I say this almost sounds like Jerry Garcia's phrasing." I think this is some of the best playing of the night, Trey's solo during Winter Queen.
I think there's so many points in 15 where it doesn't sound like Jerry per se, but just something about the fluidity of Trey's playing and how he's just kind of like firing off like riffs, which was so lacking kind of in his playing for a lot of years, and just seemed like very effortless, which I always feel like Jerry's playing is just completely effortless and just kind of like flows out of him like water. So I would agree with you.
They then go into Split Open and Melt, which I've started to call my old 3.0 nemesis, because I feel like it could go one of two ways. It could either blow me away and I love it and it goes to this strange sideways place, or it just falls apart completely. But for what it's worth, this Split Open and Melt has a lot of good jamming going for it. There's like this big wall of sound where Mike leads the melody, which you don't hear that much. Really jazzy drums. Page is on the piano. It wasn't quite holding together, but I did like it.
Yeah, I think it's a good version, and I'm kind of with you. Some of the melts in 3.0 aren't always my favorites. I'll say the melt from the most recent MSG run, I thought it was pretty terrible. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's just kind of noise.
With you.
It was like, just like they get kind of lost. It's just not great, but I've seen, some in this era that are really good, like really interesting. My note on this one was dissonant without totally dissolving. They kind of like approach that point where it gets pretty interesting and like pretty out there, and like, is it going to completely fall apart, or are they going to hold it together? And they kind of hold it together, and it's a pretty nice version, not bad.
Oh,
Tight but a little spacey the last couple minutes, but yeah, I thought it was a good version. I liked it.
feels so good to be validated. Let me tell you, it's so nice to hear it from someone else.
Yep. And I just also noted at this point, it's kind of a nice mix between 3.0 songs and the 1.0 classics, which to my kind of attendance bias and theory behind the show, kind of looking to the past, but also looking to the future, living in the now, just kind of like the passage of time. It just kind of becomes this recurring theme for me with the songs and the lyrics as we kind of go forward into the show.
Speaking of 1.0 classics, Limb by Limb and Rogue are next. I thought that tonally, Limb by Limb was a really nice turnaround from Split Open and Melt, which would fuck with your head and, make you fall apart if you were on certain things. Limb by Limb is so pleasant. I mean, I feel like the jam in Limb by Limb, normally everyone kind of jumps into the center and Trey comes out on top. It's usually very airy and very, but also dense in a weird way. I don't know what I'm saying. But this one is very spacious. Like the whole jam breathes. I thought I really enjoyed this Limb by Limb.
Yeah, really nice version. The band gives each other a lot of space, but like on top of that, Trey's somehow still playing a lot of notes, which again, was lacking for so long. And it's like amazing to hear Trey just kind of effortlessly, just kind of like ripping, but like delicately, like in and amongst, the Phish and Mike Foundation and Page going nuts, and good. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, well put. Delicately ripping. I like that very much. That's exactly right. And Rogue is another example of Mike stepping forward and kind of leading the effort. He did it at the very beginning of the show and then comes back now to do it again. And this is on the Phish.net jam charts. I don't remember, nice. I saw a good amount of shows in the summer of 2015, and I remember Rogue kind of being overplayed. I don't remember versions that really brought it out of me, but that's my personal bias. The jam charts wrote, quote, another great version, but this one is quite different from Merriweather Post in 2015. Trey deploys guitar effects, creating a very different tone to this rocking jam. I don't remember this being so rocking, but I guess there's a lot of different kinds of Rogue.
Yeah, a little on. I just wrote short but shreddy. Not a whole lot to it. I think for Rogue, like I maybe prefer more like the kind of light, airy, floating in the clouds kind of ones. Like that's what I think of with this song. But this was a good version. Again, kind of Trey going nuts and short. That was another kind of theme too, especially the first set. Everything's kind of like short but sweet. They're not hitting anything too hard. Everything sounds really good. The band sounds good. Very locked in, but they're not giving anything too much extra sauce really.
And it closes with Character Zero. If you want to talk about Trey shredding, this is standard. I'm at a point in my fandom career where if I'm here for for Character Zero and I hear them start it, if I check my watch, I know we're probably getting towards set break. I'm going to go pee and get my beer now so I get back in time for the jam, which is really solid on this one.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you there. Yep. I don't mind Zero. It is what it is. You pretty much know what you're going to get. By the end, you might start and you might kind of groan, and then by the end of it, you're throwing up the horns and like, this is the best thing I've ever heard.
Right. You get paired with more
every time you hear it. Yeah.
You pair it with more on that level where it's like you might groan, but by the end you're, you might as well be at church, singing along to it.
Yep. I actually love more. I think I'm in the minority on that, but totally same deal. By the end of it, it's like you're all in.
When everyone else comes around, you could say, I knew the whole time.
Yep, exactly. Yep. We know where this is going. Everyone's going to be feeling it. The whole place is going to be shaking.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
Set 2 opens with a song I heard the ocean sing. And before we get into the music, I want to ask, were you still on your own at set 2, or did you meet up with friends at set break?
No, totally spent the whole show by myself. So I was kind of wandered on the concourse. I guess I went over like page side and kind of got down pretty close at this for the second set. I was kind of down page side, still in the stands, but by myself, just kind of wandering. Like the first set, was really fun, kind of by myself. It's I think really the perfect show for it. Like you said, jukebox Phish. You know all the songs, like no jams to really get lost in. Just kind of like head bopping, like fun show. Just to kind of spend by yourself and just kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, you could be friends with anyone for 6 minutes.
Yes, exactly.
And the song I heard the ocean sing, this might be kind of residual feelings from Brooklyn 2004, but I always think it's a good sign when this opens a set. Like the jam, it doesn't go full force. It hangs back a little bit, but it's psychedelic. It's very even, which I think is unusual for this song. This song for me usually goes dark, heavy immediately. Usually it's like a monster with a lot of noise and power, but this one is pretty even Steven. I like it. It doesn't really go crazy.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Nice version. I think Trey's tone really sounded good here. I thought like just really nice playing. Definitely psychedelic. Short. I like when they do this in a second set where they come out and play a pretty short song and then just go into the monster jam. Feel like they've done that a lot in 4.0, whatever you want to call it, like recently, come out and play evening song and then a massive Carini or, something like that. So I like when they do that. Some lyrics in this one definitely spoke to me. The run away, run away, run away, a song I heard the ocean sing, 7 months later, I'm running away from Montana, moving to the ocean. And then I was just listening to this again today, actually, and this line stuck out to me, 10 years before the mast. I actually spent exactly 10 years in Big Sky. I was there from like 06 to 2016. Big Sky, Montana was the town that I lived in. So just kind of weird, like, 10 years before the mast and then running away to the ocean. Doesn't mean anything, but to me it meant everything. And, it's just, most shows spell something. So just kind of reading into the lyrics. So kind of cool. And
well, that's what's
nice
so
version.
Great. That's what's so great about this, where the show hasn't changed since it was played 8 years ago, but you've changed, right? That's the sign of good art. It can mean something to you at one point in your life, and then you see it again later, and it looks like, or in this case, sounds like a completely different show, or at least hits you in a completely different way. But the show, the notes that were played hadn't changed at all.
That's an awesome point. I love how you put that. The art kind of grows with you and the meaning that you ascribe to it changes and morphs over time. It's so true.
That's why I love, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but The Catcher in the Rye is, I think, one of the best American novels, because when I was in 10th grade, I thought Holden Caulfield was a cool badass who just said fuck
Yeah.
it and, all the phonies and all that and flip it off. Now that I'm 40 and I look at it, I'm like, this kid needs help.
Right.
This kid needs help. He is in danger. Something is going wrong with him and he's kind of spoiled. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's so immature. But the words on the page hadn't changed at all. It's me.
Yep. It's you. It's your life experience. You're not a ninth grader anymore. You've got all this. You're teaching. I don't know what grade you teach, but you're teaching kids now. So yeah, it's so true. Funny how it changes.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm not even as mature as a ninth grader, just for the record.
Right.
But back to Phish. So after a song I heard the ocean sing, which starts the set in kind of a short way, and I agree with you that they've done that more lately. I think energy is the big culprit. And when I say culprit, I don't mean it in a bad way. Like energy usually starts a second set and then they go into a big jam in the second song of the set. In this case, it's Chalked as Torture, where about halfway through the first jam, Trey and Fishman are already doing stop-start jamming. They're kind of reverting back to their early 1.0 days when they would do a cat and mouse game between the drums and the guitar. And I'm all here for it. I love when they play with each other.
Yep, love it. It's 2015. They've been playing this song for how many years, and it just comes off as like totally playful. Like the intro could be like 94 or something, like right off the bat. So cool.
Yeah. And the jam itself has a lot to dig into. They don't go into the build coda. It's what I called at the end, the coda with the build, and you could hear that Fishman and Trey didn't hook up on that. It happens all the time. He says, we're going to just keep jamming. And then right away, the Mutron pedal comes back to get creative. They play almost a Hey jam where it's like they're each playing one note apart from each other. Mike drops a bass bomb at 10 minutes and they are in the zone. In the zone. They're playing a whole new song.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I noted 5:30. They're just off to the races. Great Page and Trey interplay. 8 to 9 minutes, just full band rocking. Right at about 9:58 on the, I was listening on Live Phish app. I'm sure I'm the only one who heard this, and I'm sure it's not intentional, but there's a very, very minuscule Dark Star tease. Trey just plays this tiny little lick. It's like, Dark Star crashes. It's just that. But if you listen carefully, I'm sure it wasn't intentional. It's not noted, but I feel like it's just indicative of Jerry just being in his DNA from just learning all the songs, just playing and practicing the whole Dead catalog for the first half of the year. So I thought that was cool. There's a little riff that they stumble onto around the 12-minute mark. I think, was that where you said it was like a U2 song?
Well, it's funny. Yeah. When we talk about art and everything is in the perception of the listener in
Yes.
this case,
Yep.
what you hear is Dark Star. About 2 minutes later, I heard a little bit. It's a chord progression. It's not a full on tease. That is like a next door neighbor to Desire by U2. It's just for a few seconds.
Yep.
But that it sounds like good power rock. And
Yeah.
after all, they are in a stadium.
Yep. Yep. Like you said, it's only for a few seconds, but it's almost like a little metal riff, it sounds like to me. Around 12:30, it starts to get, very spacey with the weird sound effects coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It's second set now at Dick. So, Saturday night, everyone's getting a little loose, getting a little weird.
The lights are probably going crazy.
Yep, exactly. Like you picture it.
Yeah, and then you could hear the beginnings of Twist at the very end. It's not the most buttery smooth segue, but it is respectable. They do a good job.
Yeah, they take their time with it a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, and it's an excellent, in my opinion, excellent tempo control by the band that they slow down from the end of Chalk Dust, which is to me almost sounded like Undermined in a way, which is a very upbeat, fast, quick song. And then they slow down as a band to match the tempo of Twist, which doesn't have a crazy jam. It's only about 6 minutes long.
Yep.
And they slam into Mercury, which is good.
Yeah, yeah. Twist, I can take or leave. I like when they go way out with it. There's some cool jams there, but a short Twist, I'm not upset about it, but bring on the Mercury. I love Mercury. Love that song. Another of the new batch of songs. I like this one is like all Grateful Dead to me. Like I totally hear the Grateful Dead influence in it. The groove at the start of the jam where it just like a head bopper kind of like just keeps you, it just totally sucks you in. I don't know. I love it.
Yeah, it sounds like they rehearsed it a lot. They only played it, and I'll check this. I think they only played it 3 times in 2015. I think it was meant to be like a big event when they played it, but it's so complicated. Maybe they just didn't feel so confident every time they played it. But when they brought it back, I think it was like 2017, it made a few more appearances in the set lists. Man, was it an event when they played Mercury. It's probably, looking back now, probably my favorite song from the debut of this batch.
I would definitely have to agree with that. I love it, and definitely agree with you. They were obviously tinkering with it for a while. It took them a while to, how does this section lead into this? What kind of feel are we going for to make it all like seamlessly flow together? But yeah, I'll take a Mercury any day of the week. I love it.
I'll never forget. I think it was after, I forget what show. It might have even been Magnaball or something. I asked my future sister-in-law, because she was a big head. She got my wife into Phish. So I asked her, do you like Mercury? And she had no idea what song I was talking about, because she thought Mercury was actually 3 different songs. Oh. So maybe that's why they were tinkering.
Yeah, totally. It was a little disjointed, when it first came out, for sure. That's funny.
And then they go into Light, which I thought, all right, at least we're primed for a big jam. And they get right to business at about 6.5 minutes, and it blasts into outer space. It's a very quick and dirty Light. It's over just by about 10 minutes. It's short, but it packs a punch. This is maybe the birth of the micro jam.
Yeah, totally. I thought, nice version. I just wrote lift off shortly after 6 minutes, where, they're just all in, almost kind of tribal sounding around 7:30. Gets super psychedelic. I almost sounded like something from the Stick It disc to me, where it's kind of like weird, like rhythmic kind of droning, almost like 99, like weirdness, like creeping in. at around 10 minutes, they've kind of settled into this ambient, percolating kind of music, and it just kind of like bubbles up a little bit, and then settles into Wingsuit, which I thought was just a killer placement in the moment.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I had a question lined up for you that I first wrote down that it's a perfect landing spot for the light jam, but I wonder how it played at Dick's because it's such a huge venue. I think that Wingsuit is one of their best studio efforts for sure, but for some reason it doesn't get that love when it's played live, and I have a feeling it's all about the placement and possibly even the size of the venue, but it sounds like that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might have been, I'm not sure if I was totally keyed into everyone's, reaction at the time, but I think it definitely fit. I think it definitely worked. People seem to be loving it, first. At this point, they've been jamming pretty hard for a while. Chalk Dust, Twists, Light, a Mercury Light. So, it's pretty solid, however long that is, probably, 30, 40 minutes of improv. So, nice, mellow. I always think Wingsuit always sounds like Pink Floyd to me. And I'm not the hugest Pink Floyd fan necessarily, but like this, like it just has that feel to me. I guess you would call it psychedelic again, arena rock, but kind of like mid-tempo, soaring guitar solo. The lyrics of nothing lasts, nothing stays, caught in this procession of unchanging days. What's new is old, what's old is gone. You're pushed up to the edge, so put your wingsuit on. Just like chills, listening to it now, like where I was going, what was coming forward, like the unknown of, because I moved to New Jersey sight unseen. I was like backed up everything in the back of my truck, and me and my black lab like drove cross country. So it's just kind of, I don't know, cool to look back at it and think about where I was at the time and what I didn't really know what was coming, but like what was coming. So with the hindsight, it's pretty interesting.
As a New Yorker, I will not ask you when you said sight unseen, what you thought when the sight became seen of New Jersey. So
I love New Jersey. I got nothing bad to say about New Jersey. I love it here. It's all good.
And speaking of New York, they close the set with rock and roll with the New York station.
Exactly. Heard it on the New York station. Exactly. Ripping version. I just wrote Trey equals God. I mean, just like fully like just letting loose. You can't beat it.
Yeah, big time guitar solo. Tremendous energy on this version of rock and roll, which I thought was interesting placement. Usually it's a set opener or an encore. It's not typically a set closer.
Totally rocking set closer. I thought that was interesting as well. Yeah, I love it. Always love the any of the Velvet Underground songs. That Loaded album, that might be my favorite Halloween set. So I'll always take any of that.
So the encore now, they go off stage and come back on. I know I asked you this question already, but since we're at a new point in the show, are you still by yourself?
Still by myself, yep.
How are you getting home?
It's a great question. So a side note to that, I don't remember what had happened, but for some reason I was phoneless this weekend. My phone had died on me for whatever reason. Like I had ordered a new phone, but it hadn't come in yet, so I was phoneless. So I'm at Dick's Sporting Goods Arena. 30,000 Phish heads are about to pour out of the arena. How the hell am I going to meet my friends? But still solos, just loving life, bopping around, like not on anything, nothing weird, just taking it all in, just loving life,
You must have known when you saw your future wife. There's something, I don't want to speak to you about your life. Obviously, you're the guest here, but these behaviors, it just sounds like there was something that, because you seem like a pretty grounded guy. There just must have been something where like anxiety and worries just disappeared for this night. And it sounds like when you said you put your sunglasses down, the beam of light and everything.
Yes.
It just seemed like something changed.
Totally. That was the moment, and the flip switch. And I was just like, all right, I'm all good. I can do whatever I want. I can go wander around a Phish show by myself, and it's all going to work out. Everything's like right in the universe right now.
If I was your ride, I would fucking hate you. But back to the encore. They come on with Sleeping Monkey, which I thought is very funny because Page thanks everyone. It's their 5th year at Dick's, and he gets, quote, this is his words, he's emotional because Trey's about to play a song that means a lot to me. And this has been a running joke in 3.0 that Sleeping Monkey is Page's favorite song.
Yeah, really nice page banter. I was cracking up listening to it. You wouldn't, again, kind of a silly song in to the whole theme of the show for me. You wouldn't think that there would be anything meaningful with it, but the lyric just totally stopped me in my tracks. Really, like I think I listened to the show probably 3 times, almost all the way, bits and pieces. I listened to it all the way through a couple times, and then kind of bits and pieces again. And then kind of the last time I was listening to the encore, the lyric of, the feeling's not the same. In fact, it's getting pretty tame. It's just not that good anymore. I was, kind of getting burnt out on the party lifestyle, being a ski bum. I was like kind of looking for something else. And then this is where it gets weird. I guess I'll go outside, flag a weasel for a ride. So my wife, amongst all of our Phish fans, her nickname is Fee. Like everyone knows her as Fee because that's her favorite Phish song, like by far. So the weasel named Fee. So I guess I'll go outside, flag a weasel for a ride, and take it on down to the shore. It's like, this is crazy.
Yeah, that can't get more on point.
Right. Yeah. Kind of weird.
It's almost eerie and heartwarming at the same time.
Totally.
Which, aside from a Tim Burton movie, you don't get to say very often.
Right. Classic, Sleeping Monkey, love it. Got it at my first show. Classic, funny Phish. You can't beat it.
And they follow it up with, not unusual for an encore, but they play Harry Hood. It is unusual to be the middle song of a 3-song encore, though. Usually Hood, if they played for an encore, it's a standalone. But this is a really nice placement. It's a straightforward Bliss Peak Hood. And I can imagine you just hands up with the lights shining down and everything is right with the world.
Just completely in my element. Harry Hood is 100% my favorite Phish song. So that was just the icing on the cake. That was, just fist bumping, like life is good. This is amazing. And like you said, short, kind of to the point version, not much there. They sound, very good, good interplay between the band members, but, not a whole lot there to, obviously not much to come back to, but it's Hood. I wrote a average Harry Hood, or Harry Hood is like pizza. Even when it's average, it's still pretty great. So,
right. You said not much there, which is true, but there's still a universe there because
exactly.
It's Harry Hood.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I'll take a 9-10 minute Hood any day of the week.
Yep, agreed. But they're not done yet. There's still a closer, a show closer of A Day in the Life, which is a beautiful way to close it. After that chord at the end, that power chord at the end, there's nothing else to say.
Exactly. I had the same thought, like so cool, just that chord, and it just kind of lingers in the air as everyone's like, kind of comes to what just happened, and then you slowly, meander out.
And the year that you saw them in 95, your first show, A Day in the Life was commonly played. I'll check the numbers, but I remember in a lot of my tapes from 95, A Day in the Life came up a lot. And then it kind of disappeared around 97, I think. Yeah. I was so glad at Hampton when they came back in 2009. I believe it was an encore for the third night at Hampton for the 8th of March. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad they brought it back. It's not, every other show. It's not the most common song played, but it's, I don't know, like so few bands can play A Day in the Life and do it justice. And it's amazing that, our favorite band can do it.
Yeah. So it was the encore at my first show. Awesome. I love it. I loved it then. I loved it at this show. Anytime Phish plays the Beatles, I mean,
Yeah.
it's rare enough that it's, I love it. I got Dear Prudence at the Man, I think in 15. That was great. There was a really good While My Guitar Gently Weeps, I think, at the New Year's run in 19, I think. It's just rare enough. Like it's a rare enough that it's a treat anytime they play the Beatles. And I absolutely adore the Beatles. So I'll take that whenever I can.
So real quick, in a sentence or two, what was the next night like?
Amazing. Totally amazing. Yeah. Just great show. Spent that one, I was with my friends the whole time. Different vibe, more of a just at a Phish show with your friends, party vibe. And, the thank you encore was, one of the coolest things I've seen. So that was super, super cool to be there for that.
Nate, Schwerin, thank you so much for coming on Attendance Bias and taking us through this really positive roller coaster of emotions. A lot of heights and not a lot of valleys at all, which kind of describes the show. Your experience in the show kind of match up together. I could totally see why you chose it. Thank you for not only taking the time and the effort to reach out, but also to take notes and for letting us into this very meaningful night in your life.
Brian, it was awesome. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. I've been thinking about coming on, wanting to come on forever. I've been a fan of the podcast since day one. I love the podcast. So really an honor to finally come on it, and just great to see you again. It should be mentioned, we met very briefly at Fan Art at AC in 21, I think, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, great to talk some Phish. Really fun. Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode with Nate Schwerin, but now it's time for the Attendance Bias Fact Check.
Attendance Bias Fact Check.
Nate's first show on October 24th, 1995 was at the Dane County Coliseum in Madison, Wisconsin. It was toward the middle of that massive Fall 95 tour. I've never heard that show. As Nate said, it kind of flies under the radar. But according to Phish.net and Nate himself, it's full of goodies. It includes the debut, in quotes, of Taste That Surrounds, as well as a rendition of Acoustic Army, a partially a cappella Sleeping Monkey, and You Enjoy Myself with a ha 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 tease in the vocal jam. As far as I could find, the 1995 fall tour was Phish's longest tour ever with 54 shows. At the time of this recording, Nate's most recent show was the last night of the recent Summer 2023 MSG run. The date of that show would be August 5th, 2023. The next night after today's show, September 6, 2015, at Dick's with the famous Thank You Encore, has been covered on this podcast with guest Scott Marks of Phish.net and the Mockingbird Foundation. Nate references the Most Shows Spell Something show at Dick's, but neither of us could recall the exact date. That show was on August 30th, 2013, when the first letter of each song throughout the show, backwards, spelled out the phrase, Most Shows Spell Something. I mentioned that I felt like Rogue was overplayed in the summer of 2015, but looking back at the stats, the song was only played 7 times in that calendar year and just 4 times that summer. The version at Dick's from today's show was the 5th of that year. I was correct, the band played Mercury just 3 times in 2015. And finally, A Day in the Life was played 22 times in 1995, the year in which it debuted. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Nate for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You can visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can. You can also reach out to Attendance Bias on social media and tell anyone you think would be interested about the show. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.